She vanished in 1968, and for 54 years, no one knew what happened to her until now. This isn't just a cold case, it's a solved mystery with a twist you won't believe. Welcome to the obscured truth, where the past never stays buried. If you love true crime, unsolved mysteries, and real-life justice served, hit that subscribe button and like the video to help us bring more hidden stories into the light. What if I told you that a teenage girl vanished without a trace, and no one could explain how, why, or where she went until 54 years later? Sandra Young was just 17 when she disappeared from Portland, Oregon. No warning, no leads, no goodbyes. And for more than half a century, her name became just another entry in the long, dusty files of America's cold cases, until one anonymous DNA upload turned everything upside down. This isn't just another true crime story. This is about the power of science, the pain of a family frozen in time, and the relentless mystery behind a girl who vanished and stayed silent for decades. And what's even more shocking, the person who did this may still be out there, living a normal life. Most people think unsolved mysteries like this stay buried forever. But what if all it takes is one small clue, a forgotten grave, a sibling's DNA, or a family tree to bring the truth screaming back to the surface? In this episode, you're about to see exactly how that happens. So if you've ever wondered what really happened to Sandra Young, buckle up, because this solved mystery is darker, deeper, and far more disturbing than anyone ever imagined. It was 1968, or maybe early 69, when 17-year-old Sandra Young vanished into thin air. One day, she was just a typical high schoolgirl in Portland, Oregon, and the next, she was gone. No goodbye, no clue, no warning. It was like the earth had swallowed her whole. And for over 5 decades, this cold case would haunt anyone who came across it. Back then, missing girls didn't always spark national headlines. You didn't have Amber Alerts. You didn't have viral tweets or TikToks spreading the word. If you vanished, it often stayed local, just whispers in the community, a few flyers stapled to a telephone pole. And for Sandra, the silence was deafening. Her story quickly blurred into the shadows of unsolved mysteries. Sandra wasn't the kind of girl who got into trouble. That's what made it so strange. Her friends described her as sweet, grounded, even a bit shy. She didn't run with a wild crowd, didn't have a secret boyfriend no one knew about. So when she disappeared, it didn't feel like a runaway situation. It felt like someone out there knew more than they were saying. Imagine being a parent in 1969, calling the police, trying to explain that your teenage daughter would never just leave without saying something. You'd probably hear, "She's probably just out with friends. Give it a few days." And those few days, they turn into weeks, then months, then decades. And that helplessness, it never leaves you. Sandra's family searched tirelessly. They checked with friends, relatives, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something, heard something. But the trail was colder than Oregon rain in February. No one had answers, and every lead led to another dead end. For them, it wasn't just an unsolved mystery. It was a daily nightmare with no alarm clock to wake them up. Over the years, her case faded from the front page. New tragedies came, new names, new faces of the vanished. But Sandra never left the minds of those who loved her. They clung to hope like it was the last thing keeping them upright. Because in the world of true crime, hope can be both a blessing and a curse. There's something deeply unsettling about a person vanishing without a trace. No scene, no struggle, no closure. It's the kind of thing that turns ordinary people into amateur detectives, digging through yearbooks, writing to psychics, posting on forgotten forums, hoping someone somewhere remembers something. And in the case of Sandra Young, people did remember. Even decades later, her name still sparked a strange tension among Portland locals. A quiet chill. Because when a cold case lingers this long, it doesn't just live in police archives. It lives in people's bones. But then, one unexpected discovery would shake everything up. Something hidden, something buried, would finally see the light of day. It was a cold morning on February 23, 1970, when a group of Boy Scout leaders decided to explore the remote edges of Sauvie Island. They weren't looking for anything, just hiking, teaching survival skills, enjoying the quiet. But what they found buried in a shallow grave wasn't part of any lesson plan. Just beneath the soil, the outline of a human skeleton emerged. And, just like that, a day of bonding became a crime scene. The body had been there a while, long enough that all flesh was gone, replaced by silence and soil. But the placement, it wasn't natural. It was hidden, rushed, like someone wanted it to disappear without being found. And as every true crime fan knows, shallow graves always scream one thing: guilt. This wasn't a forgotten death. This was someone trying to erase a story. Police were called in immediately. Detectives marked the site, carefully extracting bones from dirt, one by one. But this wasn't CSI. It was the 1970s. No DNA, no fancy forensics, just dusty field kits and instincts. Still, even without modern tools, one thing stood out. The skull showed signs of trauma. And that detail changed everything. This wasn't just another cold case. It was a homicide. Someone had violently ended this person's life and left their remains to rot in isolation. But who was the victim? No ID, no clothing, no jewelry, nothing to trace a name back to. Only questions. And, as you've probably guessed, they would remain unanswered. For a very long time, Sauvie Island was supposed to be a place for picnics, birdwatching, kayaking, not murder. The discovery shocked the local community. Suddenly, families looked over their shoulders. Parents locked their doors earlier, and everyone had the same quiet question: who else might be buried out there? That's the kind of fear that sticks. And here's where the story gets colder than ever. Despite being classified as a murder, the remains sat in evidence storage, waiting for technology to catch up. It's a sad but all too common reality in cold cases. There simply wasn't enough to go on. No fingerprints, no dental records that matched. Just bones. Bones and mystery. Over the years, investigators would occasionally revisit the file, hoping for a break, but nothing came. And in the world of unsolved mysteries, that's often how it goes. A sudden discovery that sparks hope, followed by silence. That slowly eats it away. And yet, this case, it refused to die. Because decades later, that same set of bones, those silent witnesses, would end up back in the spotlight. Thanks to a revolution in forensic science, the tides were finally about to turn. What no one could have imagined in 1970 was that the skeleton on Sauvie Island would one day tell its story through the power of DNA. Fast forward to 2004. The skeletal remains from Sauvie Island were re-examined and transferred to the state medical examiner's office. It had been over 30 years, and the hope was thin, but not gone. Cold cases like this don't get closure easily. But sometimes, all it takes is one crack in the door. And in this case, that crack would come in the form of science. Back then, DNA. Testing wasn't what it is today. It was expensive, limited, and required pristine samples. But even so, the remains were tested. Unfortunately, no match. Nothing in ColdCases. Nothing to link this skeleton to the vanished. Just another entry in the files of unexplained mysteries, labeled, boxed, and shelved once again. Then came 2018. A federal grant offered new hope for decades-old unsolved mysteries. The money allowed Oregon officials to send the remains to a private lab specializing in something groundbreaking: DNA phenotyping. If you're not familiar, think of it like reverse engineering a face from DNA. It predicts things like hair color, eye color, and ancestry. It's science fiction. But Real.PARAB on nanolabs took the lead. They analyzed the degraded DNA and used what they found to create a snapshot, what this person might have looked like in life. The result? A hauntingly human image of a young white female with light brown hair and possible Northern European heritage. Suddenly, the bones had a face, and people started paying attention again. Imagine scrolling through Facebook and seeing a computer-generated portrait that gives you chills. It looks familiar, like someone you might have known or once heard about. That's exactly what Parabon hoped for. These DNA reconstructions don't just bring faces to forgotten, they reignite cold cases. And in true crime circles, this was huge. The image spread. Blogs, news sites, Reddit threads all buzzing. Who was she? Was this Sandra Young? Could it be someone else entirely? Internet sleuths jumped in, comparing yearbook photos, combing through archives. And while no match came right away, one thing became certain. The case was officially warm again. This is where science meets persistence. You see, cold cases don't get solved with one miracle moment. It's layers, small wins. The phenotyping didn't give a name, but it pulled this case out of the shadows. It made people care. And that's the first real step toward justice. Because once a story hits the public again, anything is possible. And as we'd soon discover, that haunting image wasn't just art. It was a breadcrumb one that would lead straight to a digital goldmine. Because in the quiet world of genealogy, someone without even knowing had just given Sandra Young her voice back. It all started with a simple decision, someone uploading their DNA to GED Match in early 2023. Just an average person curious about their ancestry, maybe looking for long-lost cousins or building a family tree. They had no idea their DNA would crack open a cold case buried for 54 years. That's the magic and mystery of modern forensics. One upload, one clue, one chain reaction. The moment that profile hit the database, the algorithm started working. Connections lit up like stars, distant relatives, third cousins, genetic breadcrumbs stretching back generations. Investigators, working with Parabon and genealogists, began tracing those threads. This wasn't guesswork. It was digital detective work, backed by science and fueled by obsession. Because when it comes to unsolved mysteries, details matter. Using public records, marriage certificates, and old census files, a family tree began to take shape. Piece by piece, names were added, relationships mapped. It was like assembling a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, with no picture on the box. But the deeper they dug, the closer they got to a shocking realization. They were circling someone connected to Sandra Young. Eventually, the DNA led to a living sibling. A woman, Sandra's sister, still alive, still searching for answers. She'd carried the weight of this cold case her entire life. And now, she had the opportunity to help solve it. Her DNA was tested, compared, verified. And just like that, the unnamed remains from Sauvie Island were finally identified. After more than half a century, Sandra Young had her name back. Now pause for a second. Think about that. For 54 years, this girl was buried without identity, lost to history. And it wasn't a badge, a witness, or a confession that brought her back. It was technology and family. That's what makes these solved mysteries so powerful. They don't just answer questions. They restore dignity. Genealogical DNA isn't just about finding ancestors anymore. It's a weapon against the void. A tool that lets the vanished speak. Again, even if it takes decades. And that's why so many cold cases are being reopened. Because every year, more people are uploading their data. And every strand of DNA is a potential breakthrough. This case lit a fire across forensic communities. News outlets picked it up, calling it a miracle of modern science and a landmark moment for Oregon cold cases. But beyond the headlines, it was something deeper. It was a sister crying on the phone, a name etched into a new headstone, a soul finally at rest. Still, one question loomed. Who did this? Identifying Sandra was monumental. Yes, but it didn't close the file. In fact, it blew the investigation wide open. Because now, with Sandra's identity confirmed, the hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. So now we know who she was, Sandra Young. But what we don't know is who took her life. And that's the part that still gnaws at investigators, family, and the true crime community alike. Because in cold cases like this, the who matters just as much as the what happened. You don't bury a 17-year-old girl in a shallow grave by accident. Someone did this. And they've been walking free for over 50 years. The Portland Police Bureau reopened the case. But let's be honest, time doesn't make investigations easier. Witnesses move, memories fade, evidence deteriorates or disappears entirely. Yet, even with all those odds stacked high, new attention brings new hope. Especially now, with the public watching and demanding answers. What's wild is how many solved mysteries are cracked decades later thanks to public tips triggered by media exposure. People talk when a face reappears. Maybe someone remembers a name, a conversation, a rumor from high school. So if you've ever heard something about Sandra Young's disappearance, even if it seems small, it might just be the missing piece. Meanwhile, investigators face a frustrating reality. Forensic genealogy isn't cheap. Each case like Sandra's can cost up to $10,000 or more. That's why so many unsolved mysteries still sit in evidence lockers, gathering dust. Not because no one cares, but because the funding isn't there. And yet, look what happened when the money was. Every dollar invested in this case brought justice closer. It brought a family peace. It gave a girl back her name. That's not just science, it's soul work. So when people say, why dig up old cases? This is why. Because the past doesn't stay buried. And neither should the victims. This case is now a rallying cry. For better funding. For more collaboration. For embracing tools like Parabon, GD Match, and investigative genealogy. Because behind every vanished person is a story still waiting to be told. And behind every cold case is a family who never stopped hoping that the person responsible for Sandra's murder is still out there, or was. Could they be dead? Incarcerated. For something else? Living quietly in Oregon suburbs? That uncertainty keeps the tension high. And for now, police are tight-lipped about leads. Which means this case could heat up again at any moment. Because the truth? Solving the mystery of Sandra Young wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The hunt for her killer is on, and now that the world's watching, there's no turning back. 54 years. That's how long it took for Sandra Young's story to finally be heard again. And yet her killer still hasn't faced justice. So I'll ask you this. How many? More cold cases are out there, waiting for someone to care? How many vanished souls are still hidden beneath our feet, with names we've long forgotten? What if one DNA test, one upload, or one voice speaking up could change everything? If this story teaches us anything, it's that no mystery is ever truly unsolvable. Not when technology, persistence, and human connection collide. So ask yourself, what would you do if it was your sister, your daughter, your friend? Do you believe Sandra's killer will ever be found? Should more funding go toward forensic genealogy? And how many other solved mysteries have started with Someone just like you curious enough to dig deeper? Let's keep this conversation alive. Because when we talk about victims like Sandra, we're not just retelling stories. We're rewriting endings. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with us for more deep dives into the most haunting cold cases, unexplained mysteries, and true crime breakthroughs. You never know. The next mystery we cover might be the one you help solve.